So Randy Shannon comes in. He has a long history of defensive football in his background, both playing and coaching. Had a pretty marginal stay at the University of Miami as a head coach, TCU, Texas A&M on the defensive side of the ball. Does he get a shot at winning the job? We hear about a national search that's been announced by the administration. So we typically, Joe, as you well know, when a big job becomes open, you hear all sorts of crazy names that people like to throw out because they like to go for the home run hitters and the big names, and then it usually settles down into a top-notch coordinator or a group of 5 coach. So who are the realistic candidates, do you think?
Well, obviously, there's speculation on the message boards, on social media all day today, all the way since yesterday, since the last 3 days. But I think obviously Scott Frost is many people's number one choice, just due to location. He's in Orlando, which is an hour and a half south of Gainesville. So he's been recruiting Florida for the last 2 years. His contract is very friendly. He has a $3 million buyout, and he's only making $2 million a year. Florida can obviously exceed that. Plus, they would be able to pay his buyout easily. But Willie Taggart, we heard his name come up today with several people. He's obviously a Florida native. He's from Tampa. He grew up there. He came from South Florida last year. He has Florida ties. He's an excellent recruiter. He's got a great staff with him in Oregon. Another contract-friendly coach. He's making $3.3 million a year. His buyout's $3 million, and it can be paid over a 48-month period in his language. So obviously very contract-friendly and I think that's going to be important to whoever gets hired at Florida as a contract-friendly coach, due to we don't know the exact number of what McElwain's buyout was. We just heard that it was less than what $12 million was. I have a feeling it's going to come out to be somewhere around $8 to $9 million. I think Florida basically said, look, we're gonna give you money to leave. We just want you to leave. We know you want to leave. Here's a number. Take it or leave it. And I think McElwain wanted out, obviously, and he took it. So I think Florida's going to look for a contract-friendly type coach. Mike Norvell, he's another guy whose name's come up. He has a friendly contract as well. That's why I think you exclude guys like Bob Stoops and Gary Patterson and Mike Gundy. I think those guys just want a little too much money for what Florida's maybe willing to spend right now. Florida's still paying Will Muschamp right now. They owe him about $1.5 million over 2 more payments, and they owe another payment in December, I believe it is. So they still are paying him, obviously, the remaining of his buyout. But I think Scott Frost, Willie Taggart, Mike Norvell, we heard Dan Mullen's name obviously come up for obvious reasons, but I don't think Dan Mullen's going to come back to Florida. Somebody posted a quote that his wife said about the fans here are unreasonable. She made comments about the fans in Gainesville. He's made some negative comments about Florida. Well, I remember when Jeff Collins came to Florida with Jim McElwain, he called it a lateral move, which at that time it absolutely was not. He made a comment when Scott Strickland got hired by the University of Florida last year that, Florida has won less games than Mississippi State over the last 6 years, which was true. So he's taken shots at Florida, and he didn't leave in the best way. He didn't leave on good terms with Jeremy Foley. He didn't leave on good terms with Urban Meyer. So these are kind of things that make me steer away from Dan Mullen. But I think Scott Frost, Willie Taggart, Mike Norvell are the 3 names right now that I would put at the top 3. Obviously, Lane Kiffin's kind of showed his ugly face on social media yesterday. I think he's just stirring the pot. I think Lane Kiffin's better than people give him credit for. I think he's learned from his mistakes. I think he has a maturity issue, and I think that would need to be corrected before he ever got hired at a program like Florida. I just don't think it's realistic. I think Lane Kiffin needs to go be a head coach at a Power 5 school and improve himself before he gets a job like Florida. But like I said, those 3 names, I want Scott Frost. I think his offense is sensational. He's a high-powered, high-energy coach. He's actually been running spread option on scout team with his football team as the quarterback in full speed practice. And I love that. He's 42 years old. I think he would bring a lot of energy. And this is one thing that I think if I was Scott Strickland that I would mandate a coach if they came in. You got 5 years. I'm going to give you 5 years. That's all you owe me, and you owe us 5 years. I want year one, the offense has to improve hands down. There's no negotiating. Year two, you have to be back to Atlanta to compete for an SEC championship and or win it. By year 3 and year 4, you have to be in the college football playoff and competing for a national championship. Those are the stipulations that I would put on any coach that came to the University of Florida.
Seems pretty cut and dry. Not a whole lot to negotiate.
Absolutely. There. And I would put high incentive-laden contract in a coach, because that when money talks and when you give coaches incentives, I think that makes people, kind of gives them a little more extra oomph in their motivation.
All right. Based on the expectations at the University of Florida and the disappointments going on 10 years now since Urban Meyer left, and even including his final season, that would seem pretty reasonable to me. Joe Vizzi joins us.
This roster is loaded, Mark. I made a comment on Twitter earlier. This roster is comparable to what Ron Zook left Urban Meyer, Mark. This roster, especially on the offensive side of the ball, is loaded with talent, and with the incoming recruits that hopefully will stick. I mean, the new coach can't ask for much. This defense is young and loaded too.
Definitely, the defense has held up its end of the bargain now, going on 5, 6, 7 years, something in that range. Joe Vizzi joining us. He covers Florida football and basketball recruiting for In All Kinds of Weather. As you can hear, he has tremendous insight into the program, college football and basketball in general as well. Joe, this is tremendous. We appreciate your time and your insight into the situation.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you having me on.